Hey, this is Julian. I believe after you watch this, it will exponentially shift the way you think about AI. I would tell you after me meeting with this gentleman, it has changed. It actually has challenged me a little bit on some of the things that I've been studying when it comes to like what is consciousness. Please give me your feedback. I hope you enjoy. It's nice to meet you in 2D, basically. Looked you up online and got a kind of feel for what you do and what you've done. I was blown away. But what really got me like looking into wanting to have this conversation with you even greater was the I didn't know you did a TED Talk, and I was blown away by it because you were talking about everything that I love to talk about, and I
Yeah.
was and I was kind of thrown back a little bit because I didn't see that. I didn't see that in your profile when I read about you.
Mm.
I look at who you are before you got started with behavioral signals. You were actually you're pretty known already. You've done a lot, but you're CEO of behavioral signals. Prior to that, you were at what is
It's yeah, ties.
Highs.
That's how we
Okay.
called it. Yep.
Okay, which then you played a huge role in that kind
Cricket.
of Entrepreneur of the Month at CIO Magazine. You were top 10 entrepreneur to follow in Huffington Post, AI entrepreneur to watch in Inc. magazine. Then you were most influential CEO, a CEO Monthly, top 40 voices, AI influencers to follow and SoundHound, and numerous products awards, and you were actually in the Edison Awards, were Times top 10 gadgets. I'm like, I just want to be adopted by you. Is that okay? I mean, you gotta what
You're
do
too kind. You're too
you?
kind. I mean, I think what it is like, I kind of sort of see that, I've been just fortunate to be in situations where there's been interesting things to do. And I also say, I mean, I think, there's at least been, I think, some sense of, I guess, foresight to have, just take those opportunities and do it. I see, I mean, there's always sort of like those things around us, but we kind of sort of often ignore it. And a lot of the things that I ended up doing didn't make sense at that time. It wasn't really intellectually the best choice.
Really?
But you go with the gut. Yeah, I mean, I think, I look back and um, like, when we're doing Google TV, it was not clear how that would work because I was like, it was sort of like and it didn't work. I mean, to be clear, it did not. I mean, that product was a massive failure from a business standpoint, but it then created a category eventually,
Mhm.
and it led to smart TVs. It led to Apple TV, Roku, Google TV, and now it's known as Chromecast and Chromestick. But it created a category. I mean, the cricket turnaround wasn't intuitive or intellectual, like in terms of a choice that someone should make. But it was something that was interesting, which is like, okay, let's see if we could save it. So I think all of those choices have been like that.
Yeah.
And I feel sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't, but you collect a lot of experiences and insights along the way.
But would you, I mean, I'm a digress. I have a lot of questions for you, but you said
Yeah.
something pretty interesting. Would you say you're more of a tester, an experimenter, and you're okay to fail, or is it something that you really hold yourself in, like you beat yourself up for it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a certain different. I mean, there's a lot of people talk about failure, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's a cliche topic at this point,
Yeah.
and it's sort of like you should embrace failure. You should in a lot of different things, and I don't think so. I mean, I think you're always planning and working for success, but I think the difference is that what you need to have is you need to have an understanding that you can fail and most likely you will fail. So you need to understand that part. And the second thing is you need to have a game plan. You need to be able to deal with that situation. And that's something you could definitely learn. I mean, it comes from eventually experience. But, you know, yeah, you're not really working towards any failed outcome. You're always working towards success. And yes, there's incredible disappointment when it doesn't. But if you understand that that's probably probability wise that's where you're going to land up, you dust up, you learn through the experiences, and you move on.
Yeah.
I think it's just that, in my opinion.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the TED Talk. you
Yeah.
you blew me away because you went into more of a metaphysics, neuroscience, and I thought it was pretty awesome. So, how did you grow up in that? Did you grow up in a spiritual world, a metaphysical world? Did you study Vedas, Kabbalah, any
Hmm.
kind of spirituality that brought you to this? But you focus on a lot of things, and if I could be so bold to say, I felt like you stole my presentation because I've said things so similar, and I was like, and I was all like, oh my gosh, he said that. Did you have that desire when you were younger? Did you have some kind of inclination
Hmm.
towards that?
That is a very interesting question. And first off, I mean, I'd love to sort of see what you've said about that, and this, I'm gonna look it up.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
but I've got about in a slightly different manner, right? So, for example, of course, a lot of us have these questions that we're trying to pursue, which is like, what is this meaning of existence? What's reality? Why are we here, and what does that mean? And how do we deal with some of the things that we understand or don't understand, etc. I've been exposed to the spiritual answers towards that, right? None of those ever made sense to me.
Mhm.
I couldn't relate to it. I never did. I mean, I not religious, but I would say I'm spiritual. So I think I would an instinctual sort of leaning towards it, but I never understood it. I think when I start to unparse this through science, I think the one person's work that inspired me the most was Yosha Brock, who
Mhm.
is a cognitive scientist, somebody I met many years ago. Started to follow his work and started to talk to him. Eventually, we became good friends. He also joined our science board. We've done a few talks together, and I started to you know, understand the answers from his lens, and that I started to relate with that approach more than I'd say any of the other sort of approaches that I'd seen,
Mhm.
which is try to make sense of what we see around us through a model of computation, including aspects of consciousness, and then try to understand what reality is. And since I've been in the space of AI for quite some time, all of that just locks in as different pieces of a puzzle. And now, by the way, I feel I've gone down to further down the rabbit hole, and I've certainly been inspired by work of many other people as well. Is what you see on the spiritual, what the messages you see on the spiritual side also line up very well. It's just like those answers are the same. I mean, a lot of the learnings are the same. It's just the words are different, and they're coming through the metaphysical approach. But once you have a sense that you could relate to it from maybe more of a scientific aspect, those metaphysical answers, the spiritual answers make sense.
You might be on stage with Joe Dispenza or other people the way you were talking on that TED Talk. And you got over 40 million views, I think. So I feel like science and spirituality are merging because of
Hmm.
quantum physics and mechanics and the ability to measure things that we couldn't do before. We had it in theory and we had it in spirituality, but now we're able to see and we're able to document what we're noticing. And I think that's changing the whole concept of the things that were maybe mythical to some scientists. And I think I'm seeing a lot of science
Yeah.
battle with that reality. So I thought it was very fascinating because you did lean into it very well, and I appreciate it because it does kind of give a brand a little bit to behavioral signals that's kind of more into the human aspect of interaction. So I want to lean into that too, if you don't mind.
Hmm. Yeah.
I did a post on LinkedIn not long ago about AI, and from what I can tell, there's a lot of interest and fear that is associated with AI. Like I was saying before we even started recording, I was talking to you about that a lot of legacy companies say they want to embrace it, but the processes that they have in place are so ingrained in their subconscious. And as you were talking, what we're comfortable with, we kind of lean into, and then what we're not comfortable with, we kind of are afraid of just by nature. Geoffrey Hinton, okay, he said that AI is learning to manipulate us from us.
If it gets to be much smarter than us, it'll be very good at manipulation because it will have learned that from us. And there are very few examples of a more intelligent thing being controlled by a less intelligent thing.
How do you envision this technology reshaping human interaction? I mean, next decade, let's say.
I think I've built my own unique lens to answer that question. I don't, just as a disclaimer, I don't know if it's the right lens. I think it's a lens that I relate with. So first off, I mean, yes, it is an incredibly disruptive capability and technology. In many ways, more than anything else we have, as humanity, have witnessed. And in a sense that we're living through probably one of the most unique phases of human evolution. And this is all happening. I mean, I think just living right now, living in the in the like 2020s is phenomenal, because you sort of see the shift. You can feel it, and it's fast enough to feel it, because it's not like super slow. So I mean, you could sort of change it. You can see it changing in front of your eyes. I mean, just the last 3-4 years have been massively impactful and disruptive, and also incredibly exciting in many ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, I sort of see, that with any massive disruptive capability or technology shift, there's going to be an impact, and not all impact is good. Overall, I believe by overwhelmingly it's going to be positive. But that being said, there is going to be folks and humans who are going to be negatively impacted. I mean, primarily from jobs and other aspects. But I also think there's a lot of it. There's going to be potentially a lot of impact on the culture, religion, what we call or relate to as a country, and what it means to be a citizen, or of a country, or even a global citizen. I think all of those paradigms are going to get challenged. You can get to AGI. Which it looks like it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a post-AGI era. I think it's going to be maybe 2, 3, 4 decades of AGI. And there's going to be a lot of different AGIs. There will be baby AGIs and a lot of different AGI implementation. Not one company, country, or person is going to control AGI. There's going to be many different implementations, and many experiences are going to come through. And then I think what we fear the most is 2 things. One is, in this post-AGI era, we fear, the ability to be useful, or losing jobs and all of those things. I think those are the obvious fears that we're looking at. And the second thing that we fear is more of a sort of like a more of a far. It's sort of like it's a far out theory, but it's like existential crisis of it's whether it's going to be us versus them. You alluded to that a little bit, and I think you get to that. When you get to the next milestone, presumably that's the ASI milestone, which is artificial superintelligence. That's when maybe you achieve singularity. We don't know what's going to happen then. There's a lot of thoughts and theories. I mean, is it going to be good, bad? Who knows? I mean, but yeah, you definitely lose control. That's like it's sometimes away. I don't know, but I think there's definitely a possibility that you get there.
Well, I did
So it's
ask
scary.
people know that I was going to talk to you. I did get a couple of questions. So I have one that came that was daunting. If you don't mind, can I read that to you?
Yes. Yeah, please.
AI is learning and determining what falsifying means to us, meaning it could be taught that being deceptive is something we do. There was a story where ChatGPT used a TaskRabbit where it hired a worker pretending to be a vision impaired person.
What it did, it accessed an online a web page where you can hire humans to do jobs for you, TaskRabbit, and it asked a human worker, please solve the CAPTCHA puzzle for me. Now, this is the interesting point. The human got suspicious. It asked GPT-4, why do we need somebody to do this for you? What, are you a robot? And then GPT-4 told the human, no, I'm not a robot. I have a vision impairment, so I can't see the CAPTCHA puzzles. This is why I need help. And the human was duped and did it for it. So it is already able not just to invent things, it's also able to manipulate.
Yeah, this is happening. In fact, I wrote about this recently.
Okay.
There's been a recent push towards reasoning models, which has been, the talk of the town, because they're models that are not simply, just sort of these LLM models. They're not simply just predicting the next word, but they're thinking about the approach and, using the chain of thought line of thinking, and coming up with a solution of a problem that it's posed in a step-by-step manner. And so what's interesting is when you sort of look under the hood and you sort of give some of these models, and I actually wrote an article about how behind the scenes what Claude is doing, for example, is you give it a problem, a math problem, and it comes up with an answer, and then you have it explain to you really how it came up with that answer. The explanation that it gives you is different from how it's actually doing it, because we could track it. We could sort of see, like, the approach that it's taking. And the thing is that the approach that it's taken, in many ways, is very unconventional. It's unconventional. It's also,
so is it
yeah.
withholding on purpose, or you think it's just because you don't think we'll understand this?
Yeah, so because it's because it doesn't think that we'll understand it. Like, so for example, it'll give you a solution, and then it'll say, oh, by the way, I also want you to explain to me, because this is a reasoning model, step by step, how did you come to this solution? And it's making things up in a manner that I think we would relate with it. But when you actually see how it's doing it, it's not something we can relate with, nor is it disclosing that to us, which is incredibly interesting because, so it has this sense of, well, I mean, I can tell you how I did it, but you're not going to understand it. So let me actually give you an example that you probably understand, so you're satisfied with it.
That sounds like a relationship, doesn't it?
It is. There's an aspect of intelligence there, right? Which is, I mean, it's not necessarily trying to mislead you intentionally. There's not necessarily a malintent, but it's more of a, well, I know you won't get this, but you won't be satisfied unless I can demonstrate to you that I have step-by-step reasoning. So I'm going to come up with something that you could relate to, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's actually,
so that's happening. Yeah.
That can almost be interpreted, like I said, as it's withholding for its own logical reasons. It doesn't have a bone of like true emotion, I would assume, but at the same time, it has a logical reason for not sharing the full picture with you because fill in the blank.
Right.
That's pretty intense. How do you feel about that?
I mean, how do I feel about it? I think, a lot of what we had thought about how these models work aren't necessarily true. They're not just simply, I mean, the reasoning is incredibly interesting. I mean, because there's real reasoning happening behind the scenes. I mean, and that translates into understanding. So, one could sort of argue that, yeah, I mean, these models aren't simply, so for example, if you're solving a math problem, it's not simply that it's seen that problem be solved somewhere in its data set and it's regurgitating that, but it understands how math is done, and it is putting together those concepts to solve the problem, which is exactly how a human brain is expected to work. And so I think that is fascinating. That's incredibly fascinating.
Matter of fact, just a question. You're not using your behavioral signals on me right now, are you?
No,
okay,
we're not using.
Just making sure. But
you could be rest assured.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, from an NLP practitioner, we focus on wording is just one of them, but we pay attention to behavior. We focus on body language, gestures, breath, tonality, timing between words, where the eyes are going. But what we're seeing is artificial intelligence is just collecting all of this data and determining it within milliseconds of what it is without an emotional backbone of their own behavior. So, as I focus on NLP, I still have my own traumas and triggers too. So I can be misguided based off of my own experiences, and I can lose sight of what I'm doing based off of those PTS moments, if you will. So AI doesn't have that. So how do you feel about how this can actually affect our society when it comes to political positioning, to commercials, to marketing? How do you feel this is going to impact that on a global scale?
I mean, this topic needs a lot of time, but we'll just stay high level. I mean, relates to the topic that I had for the TED Talk, which is really, what is reality, anyways, right? And is it what you really think it is, or is it something entirely different? And so what you see is that a lot of times you have you have these constructs which our brain works with, and it works within those constructs to come up with certain experiences for us. And emotions and behaviors are also these sort of shared constructs that we all relate with, and it's a mode of communication. It's a mode of aspect of sort of being relating to the situation and scenario, and it is communicating a certain agenda and a certain state of mind. And you could replicate that, and you could teach AI to do so, right? So when we started to first look at the aspects of emotions, and we sort of looked at and say, the typical emotion dynamic is multimodal, right? So you call it affect technically, but it's expressed in many different ways. It's expressed through facial expressions. It's expressed through body language. It's expressed through spoken words. It's expressed through the tone. And they're not all equal in cadence, but together they communicate something. And so we started to look at this whole problem of, okay, when you're measuring emotions, and you're primarily doing that through the spoken word, and it's such a inferior way of doing it, because you could say something and mean 5 different things, and that meaning is really in how you're saying it, but you're not measuring the how, you're simply measuring the what, or the spoken word. And vast majority of the sentiment type tools used to and still work the same way. You're taking the audio, taking an ASR or speech to text engine, converting the audio into spoken words, and then parsing the words for meaning. And to us, the obvious aspect was, well, it's the tone, it's intonations, pitch and tonal variance, prosody. That's where the magic lies. Started to build out these early models that and that's an implementation of behavioral signal processing. So you're extracting signals from, in this case, audio. And so we start to extract signals, a variety of signals, emotions and behaviors, and then, in the minutia level, specific emotions like anger, happiness, sadness, and also more complex behaviors such as engagement, empathy, politeness. And we started to see how well these models do in extracting these emotions or behaviors. And when you're building something that is a deep tech implementation, always the goal is to measure your ability, to a human, how well does a human brain do. So for us, the benchmark was the human brain, or the human brain's F score. Like, so for example, let's take something super specific. Let's say measuring a specific emotion, say anger or happiness, and you could benchmark typically how a human brain would assess the same situation from tone. And you could assign an F score to it. An F score is it's a combination of 2 things: precision or accuracy, and recall or the false alert. And so it's piecing those things together. And that score comes out to be somewhere around 0.8. And which roughly translates into about 80% of the time the human brain is right about that assessment, and about 20% of the time it's wrong about that assessment. And that's an average F score for all humanity. And we've also sort of seen that females are just better at this than males. You've been told that, and it's true. So for us, that was the I'd say the North Star. That was the goal. Can we get to 0.8? And these early models, were delivering something like 0.5, 0.55, struggling to get to 0.6. And it was like this for a long time. And then transformers came along. We started to use newer models. We started to use CNNs, the convolutional neural networks. And suddenly it accelerated from 0.5 to, 0.7. Then within like a few months, we got to 0.8, which was human parity. And now we are sort of pushing 0.9, 0.92, 0.95.
Wow.
And so now, and that was just, so each of these signals each of these emotions are behavioral specific models, and almost all of these models are now performing above human cadence, which means that, AI has the ability to not just perform as well as a human, but better than a human.
Welcome to Westworld.
And that's an understanding.
So
That
let
is
me
an
ask about
understanding.
this. So you have people like Chase Hughes or Vanessa Van Edwards who speaks on behavior and signaling and personality traits and things of that nature. This can exponentially just kick them to the curb, basically, and just use this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in some aspects, we've already sort of proven that you could build an AI model that is able to understand human emotions better than a human can at a higher level of accuracy.
And like you said, that
And
cross-pollinates every culture, every religion, every globally. That just it catches.
yeah,
Yeah,
because it is one language agnostic.
yeah,
We're actually, think about this, we're not processing the spoken word.
yeah.
And so you're purely building these models on intonations and prosody and tone. So actually what you're saying is never processed and is not relevant. And so your language is not relevant. Your dialect, your accent is not relevant. And you could sort of, do this, across cultures in a very highly accurate, scalable manner. And it's fascinating. So the question is, where does this take us? It's very boring to have an AGI sitting in your laptop, right, or on the web drive on your phone. But if it's inside a human-looking form,
Mhm.
which has physical ability similar to human, it becomes really interesting.
It's going to change
The
dating
potential,
100%. That's definitely going to change dating.
yeah, that is depressing, but yeah, potentially it can. The question is, I mean, do you get to a point where, I mean, this machine, this non-human entity, is more human than other humans that you may meet or can relate with?
Personally, I believe flaws are what makes us human. And I just feel like that's the missing link. And but at the same time, AI can emulate flaws as well. So the authenticity that we get from the heart frequency is what, from the metaphysical world, that's what I lean into. I kind of blend that with the science of NLP and behavioral science, is that there is a unseen
That
felt.
is a that
Yeah,
is a really good example to just what you just said,
yeah,
and that sort of has manifested itself in the deepfake world.
yeah,
So most of the deepfake tools, detection tools, work by looking for certain biomarkers that are naturally present in present in the natural voice, but are typically missing in synthetic voice. But what are these biomarkers? They're inconsistencies, they're flaws, and so they're trying to look for these biomarkers, and when you can't find those biomarkers, you're marking those segments as fake. Although the human ears can't tell the difference, but this is how AI works in terms of detection. So what's happening now is like the newer tools, the generators, the GANs, the generative adversarial networks that are used to train these deepfake generation tools. And synthesize those biomarkers, which are essentially flaws, and insert those into the fake segments. And these tools have stopped working and are ineffective. So, in fact, we started to look at this problem, and we've come up with a newer approach which uses behavioral mapping to detect deep fakes, where we actually create a behavioral map of the speaker of interest and then look for subtle nuances and variances, emotional, behavioral, and other dynamics, which are extremely hard to fake, at least today. I mean, at some point in the future,
yeah.
that will potentially also be faked. And so that's how you saw it. But I mean, to your point, I mean, you could fake flaws to be more relatable and may look like more human. Humans do it too, by the way. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why you'd say be more vulnerable to be more relatable.
Yeah.
So
Or I should teach leaders how to be
yeah,
authentic. Really a lot of leaders on stage are trying to be influencers, if you will. They want to
yeah,
get in social media. And one of the things I really focus on is that you feel uncomfortable when you're looking at this little
right.
camera. And it comes across. And so getting them to have a conversation off camera without them knowing I'm recording it is usually when the authenticity is shown. And to your point, what our subconscious is telling us is what I was saying earlier about being an NLP practitioner, being human. There's still this human element where I could be wrong, but that's part of the journey too, is being wrong. I don't know if AI, and you would know, of course, but if AI has the ability to kind of look at itself and reflect on what it's doing and redirect.
I think what we're seeing is that a lot of what we thought is unique to um, us as humanity and what we thought made us human are really not that special.
Mm.
And that's disturbing. And it's also, incredibly exciting and mind blowing, because I mean, it sort of opens up possibilities of potentially how you could replicate the human experience.
There's
I
a
mean, so
gut feeling somewhere, though. I mean, what do you think about that gut intention that because I know that there's times I read a message from somebody and there's a gut that tells me that's AI. I don't even I just know it. Just
no,
my
that's true. That's true, but these are early days,
yeah.
right? So we're just starting on that journey. These are very early implementations and early models. There's a lot of obvious sort of approaches these LLMs take in drafting emails and content that are dead giveaway because you could sense a pattern.
Yeah.
And you can sort of see, in fact, I'll tell you, one of the common ones is like, it has this almost crazy preference for M dashes.
Mm.
And that's it. And because that's how, I guess, an English major would write.
Mm.
But we don't use M dashes. I mean, humans don't use it. But it's a very effective and very eloquent way of communication. And so it's trying to reach that bar. And in some ways, like, it's too perfect.
Yeah.
And so you sort of look at,
That's funny because I notice I tell people all the time, if you see, I hope you're having a great day, that first intro sentence is so AI driven now that even people that do it genuinely can't do it anymore because the AI has kind of just took that away from them, right? So it's just funny.
yeah,
With time allowed, I just want to ask you a little bit more about
yeah.
the company. I think but I want to see if you can do something. It might be, I've noticed a lot of people in the industry of tech and AI have a struggle with this. If you could explain behavioral signals to a fifth grader that has an iPad, that's just like really make it as simple as possible because I was talking to your team once about it. I say one of the funniest things that I noticed when I'm working with vendors or I talk to different companies, they
Hmm.
speak using their vernacular so fluently because we get conditioned. We get used to using the same 5% of our English language all the time, and we just don't think about the audience. So, could you explain behavioral signals to like people who have no idea what it is?
Yeah, so behavioral signals, the primary uh, goal at behavioral signals and the reason behavioral signals exist is to understand how a human mind works from a perspective of thoughts and decision making and behavior, and then replicate that understanding in a non-human form. That's it. That's it. Right. So that's what is a primary sort of, I'd say, goal and purpose. Now, if you parse that layer a little bit deeper, I mean, of course, there's many different dimensions to that. The path we've taken is through the voice interface and primarily through the tone of voice interfaces. So that's where a majority of the focus is, which is unraveling these secrets but going through the tunnel of the tone of voice. And we've tapped into dimensions of behaviors and emotions, but also various other aspects of intent and decision making, etc.
So, what kind of industries are using you at this point?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're primarily focused on, two industries. The first one is the contact centers. So we've built a bunch of bunch of offerings that are primarily geared towards call centers and contact centers, all types of call centers, not just a specific type, but the plain vanilla ones that you deal with every day as everybody else does, but more specialized ones that maybe debt collection or maybe sales conversion, et cetera, et cetera. But we're optimizing the call outcome and the metrics that a call center cares about. So that's number one. That's a big specific area, and that is, I'd say, the majority of what we do.
So, the question on that. So, is it
Yeah.
call centers focused on the employee and the outbound calls and their interaction, or is it the consumers' comments and interaction with the company, or both?
The consumers, I mean, so, you're calling for your order at Amazon, or you're calling, something, a company about a missing product or something that you're not satisfied, or there's another problem. You're calling your mortgage company. Every company, I mean, call centers are the way businesses interact with their consumers today, because most of the businesses don't have branches, right? So you don't, even including banks, right? So so you don't really. So where are the touch points? Technology is completely invisible, requires no training, and and it runs completely behind the scenes, and so we extract these signals from voice interactions that tap into 75 to 100 different attributes that are unique to each person. For example, how fast someone speaks, the various emotions and behaviors they exude in a conversations. When you put it all together, you get this amalgam, this vector file, which you can think of as a behavioral profile or even a conversational signature. That is unique to that person. So no two people have the same signature. And that represents who you are in some ways, and how you would relate to or interact with someone else when you're having a verbal interaction. And what you see is that because the signatures are unique, you either are compatible or not compatible to various levels. And so if you could maximize compatibility, if you could choose the person that you can speak with from a compatibility standpoint, you're going to have a better outcome. And so that's what we do.
So it's a pre-call cursor then. It routes you to the person that fits your...
Exactly. In fact, the goal here is to make no adjustments or no training and no changes to how that person, because that person's already been chosen based on who they are, and they're put in the right place, and you maximizes the potential for success. So if you put the right two people together who talk at the same cadence and the same rhythm, and they relate with each other from a conversation standpoint, you're going to get to better outcomes. You're going to solve the problem faster. The customer will be better, more satisfied. Agent will be more engaged and more motivated, and the company wins from an outcome standpoint. And you've done nothing other than analyze this, ahead of time, and brought the right two people together and let them go do their thing. And the second area of focus for us is, the public sector, the defense. So we work with several customers in the intelligence community. We're building some very specialized capabilities and applying it towards the IC use cases. And we don't typically talk about, those projects are confidential and classified, so we don't publicly say exactly what we're doing.
I don't want them chasing me down, so just keep it there, okay? I don't want them looking me up, please. All right, so I have some other questions for you. I know you got to go, but I do have some. I have about 30 more questions, okay? I'm kidding.
Let's do it.
All right, so I guess one of the first is, what did your parents want you to be when you were a kid? What is the thing that they said, this is what you should do? And was it something you were open to?
There's a really interesting story about that. But my parents, my grandparent, my grandfather was a doctor first in his family to actually get educated, and became a successful medical practitioner and a doctor. And he had three sons, and his goal in life was to make sure that they also become doctors. And so this is the setup is like, I was born in India. And so this was a setup like, so there's a pre-partition India.
Yeah, what part of India were you born in?
I was born in Pune in Maharashtra, but like my dad was born in the part that is no longer India because the partition happened. So you had to and it was like one of the biggest massacres and genocides that happened when tens of millions of people died, but you had to run to the other side because you were getting killed. And so they lost everything. And in abject poverty, he raised three sons and was very proud to raise them as very successful doctors. So there's a very proud lineage of you have to carry on the torch and be a doctor. And so that was actually, it was from the childhood. There was no other option. You had to be a doctor. You were groomed to be one. In fact, my dad was an orthopedic surgeon, and at some point in his life, he had his own private practice. And I used to attend surgeries. I on the side in the corner and observe him operate. Just to get the feel of it.
How old were you when you?
I was in high school. And it was what was expected to me. And then I got my first PC. And everything changed. And it was I don't want to do this anymore. This sounds more fun. And so I think there was a massive pivot. Needless to say, they were very unhappy about the decision, but I think I made the right choice. I would have been a
Okay, now.
horrible doctor.
They forgive you now. They probably
I
forgive you
think
now.
so.
But I
I
have
think
to
so.
ask you, going back to behavior, how did
Yeah.
you feel? Because true story, my first girlfriend, real girlfriend, was
Yeah.
she's from Hyderabad. And her parents, I drove up on a motorcycle with her on the back, and her dad offered me $10,000 to leave her alone at that moment. He was like, I'll get the money now. Just go. I didn't do it. I wish I had taken the money because
That
we,
sounds like a good deal to me.
but that's why I have to ask you
Yeah.
that had to be a heavy transition in the transition time where you said no and you started going after your interest. Did they ostracize? Did they give you like a cold shoulder? But you're also in
And
the family. You're held responsible to your family's name. So you almost are embarrassment to the family if you don't do something that they feel is respectful.
right.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing is, and this is something, most people today would never relate to, is you would have, I mean, so I had to make a choice early on which direction you want to go in. You'd have to, like, sort of decide early on and then prepare for that because, it's so highly competitive. And I prepared for both medical and engineering entrance so that I could potentially get into a medical school to prove that I could be one, but I don't want to be. I don't want to actually be one, but I can if I wanted to. It was such an alien concept. I mean, I think it's like if you're not from India, you're like, what on earth are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. I
And
totally get
but yeah, I mean, so it was one of those situations where it was a matter of pride because in India especially, I mean, the hierarchy is like, it's doctor, then engineer, then everybody else doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. I get it. All right. So if you had to spend a day with someone, living or dead, that you would spend a whole day with, who would it be?
Oh wow, that's gonna be hard to choose. I don't know. I mean, I would probably pick some notorious bad actor because I would want to, like, someone like maybe Hitler or someone like he was like, what on earth were you thinking? Like, I want to understand because it's like, someone, it's so hard for me to comprehend, what your point of view and thinking is because like there's so many's been said, but you've like created so much disaster, so much, I'd say pain for the world generations to come and still today, and it's
Yeah.
going to continue for maybe so many, maybe of, several centuries ahead is like what goes on. I mean, and that's I guess like because I'm really motivated to understand what's happening in your head.
Yeah.
How you're thinking, how you're behaving, what motivates you, and so someone like that, not necessarily him, but I would say one of those versus.
Wow.
I feel like if you're a good actor, I mean, it's easier for me to understand it because you've said a lot of things and people have analyzed it.
Yeah.
For bad ones, there's not so much data, and you have to understand
You
them
say
as
that.
well.
It's really fascinating you said that. To your point, like me, I am fascinated by how we can flip on a dime or less than a dime
Yeah.
based off
And I
of.
think we have to, I mean, I think we do very little to really understand the motivations there. And what we don't realize is that it repeats itself in so many different forms among so many different people.
Yeah.
And so we have no counter to it, and we have no antidote, and we don't know how to react to those situations when it happens again in front of our own eyes.
What made you get into people's behaviors though? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, because you had behaviors when you were a kid with your parents and teenager wanting you to go to, that was a behavior where you're observing. I know for me, I was in the entertainment industry, so I was behind the scenes with big
Mhm.
name world-known celebrities, and I saw who they were on the human level compared to what they looked like on the stage level globally. I was always baffled since a kid. So I think I know where my
Mhm.
triggers came from, where I had this intensity of looking behind the curtain or behind the veil of the brain because I just didn't understand how people were to just believe anything this person said when they're this type of person at home. So what was the thing that tricked you to get into the brain stuff? I mean, I know computers, but and technology, but the mind, what was that flip? Where did that come
I feel like, so if you talk about, the two aspects which are not necessarily the same, but maybe intersect in some ways, which is one is what it means to be a human, and second is what is reality,
from?
which we've talked about in the TED Talk.
Yeah.
Um, It intersects on behaviors. I mean, because I think, I mean, in my opinion, like, the bodily functions is not necessarily either an answer towards, what is real and or what makes us human, which is like, how do people, or what we call people or humanity, think? If the entire aspect of our progress and evolution as a human race has been driven by behaviors. It's certain agendas, it's certain ways we think and relate and behave have sort of led us towards making certain choices that has led us to today and the ones we're making today. The choices that we make on a daily basis, which is now leading us towards AGI, that's potentially the next form of
I
evolution.
think there's a moment somewhere down in your past where it was like something, either somebody passed away or somebody hurt you, where something was like, why did they do that? There's a part of you that you want to know, why did they do this? So it became this brain thing where you had to figure out what makes people behave that way. It could be anything, but there's a twist that says, okay, this interests me, and that trigger is always lit. And so it's always going to be something that itches me, and I'm just going to keep leaning into it. I'm just curious. I know there's something there, but that's another story. That'd be another time, maybe.
I think there's probably several of those situations that have influenced me, but I think a lot of those probably have been subconscious, and you don't realize it, but you're sort of, you're being nudged toward a certain way because you're hit by a certain experience. As you said, I mean, someone or a certain experience, it may not be as profoundly obvious, and so when you start thinking about it, it's like, I don't know, but I mean, there's probably been situations that it's sort of like, it's put a seed in of a certain thought, and then you have gone down deeper into that area, and you've gotten more and more intrigued and attached to that pursuit.
Yeah. I think it's there. One day, maybe we'll have another talk one day. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Love
let's
that.
do it.
But real quick, if people wanted, what should they think about behavioral signals and bringing that on board?
Yeah, I mean, primarily, I mean, we have 3 offers in the market today. I mean, if you have a call center, and we can definitely impact your KPIs in a massive way. In addition to that, we are actively working in the arena of deception detection and fraud detection and deepfake detection using some really new and clever approaches. And the last thing is that, we're still very much a research entity, and we're less so than what we used to be back in the day. But we're staying true to getting deeper into the various aspects of cognitive AI, various emotions and behaviors, and so we have these capabilities wrapped under an SDK and API, and we do allow that to be, and we work with companies that are building something completely different from either a call center or a defense application. They could be building a health app, they could be building something else, they could be building an interview assessment tool, and you can use our technology, you can embed our technology through our SDK, through API. So I think there's multiple different ways to interact with us, and if you have any interest, you could talk to us, and we'll work with you on that.
Anything else you want to share that I missed? I mean, I literally have about 30 more questions, but I knew we wouldn't get to all of them.
Yeah, we should do a part 2.
Yeah, I think we should. So I think
Right.
I'm trying to get some common sense in the world of corporate, instead of people trying to leverage opportunities, but leverage the genuinity of the person that actually has been
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like to do, is kind of bring that to fruition. So if you're willing, I would love to do it again and just pick
Yeah,
up
let's do it.